that if something ever happened to Karen, I would want to move out of Boston and go to New Hampshire and get myself a log cabin way off the road so that I could just be left alone. And and then I said, my wife also was thinking about moving to North Carolina. And he said, it is so hot in Florida and North Carolina and South Carolina that it's just unbearable down there. You have to either stay in your house with the air conditioning on or in your car. Well, can you imagine that type of heat here in Boston, 24 hours a day, 7 days a
No,
week?
I couldn't. I actually was in Florida for 2 years and I was very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable.
What was uncomfortable for you? What was the
The weather was uncomfortable. It was too hot. It was humid. It was uncomfortable. There were too many places that did not have air conditioning.
Mhm.
I was working with young women who were mentally ill and pregnant, and they were
Mhm.
uncomfortable, and I was uncomfortable, and it was very difficult to help them to feel better about their health.
Yeah, and that's why people say they like New England because of our seasonal changes, with
Mhm.
exception to the extreme winter that we never really experienced last year.
Right, right.
Do you know that we never made a phone call to Mark Stallworth, who shovels our church last year, because we never had over 3 inches of snow. So last year it wasn't a winter, you know?
I know I had two snowstorms in Hull, and it was one was 2.5 inches and one was 3 inches, and then it rained, and so the
Yeah.
snow disappeared.
Well, my wife and I are staying right here as of this moment. We're not transitioning out. And if you move out of Boston now and you go to a new city, a new state, and you decide that it doesn't work for you and you want to come back to Boston, there's no coming back. Once you leave Boston now, you're done. Correct?
Yes, yes. I can't
Because
imagine. I cannot imagine what it would be like.
you'll never be able to purchase a home back in Boston unless you are a multi-millionaire and money is no object. So
Absolutely.
did you see the stories that are in the newspaper about Mayor Michelle Wu has prepared what they call a Nixonian enemy list? Did you see that? It's in the Herald and the Globe.
I saw a little comment, but I didn't really understand the whole part of the story.
Well, apparently, I remember years ago, former President Nixon prepared what they called an enemies list. So he had the names of all of the people that he wanted to
Uh,
stay away from. He wanted the police to know who they are. It was an enemies list, and that list went public. So Michelle Wu, the mayor, was asked by the Boston police, according to the story, if she would prepare a list of people who were angry with her or the people that were outside of her house with a bullhorn protesting her. People protested her at a Dorchester parade. So the police wanted the names of all of those individuals. And what I don't understand with any politician, you may have given the police those names in secrecy, but the names, those things are always leaked to the press. And so she's now they call her a progressive leader, but she took a major hit with the revelation that she compiled a list of vocal critics and sent it to the police department. So she's having one misstep after the next misstep after the next misstep. So when you talk about mental health in your neighborhood, there are people in Boston who are not feeling good about Boston because of our present leader. I'm not feeling this way at this point. I have hope that a lot of what Mayor Michelle Wu is going through is what a new mayor would go through, learning how to navigate their way as the mayor of the city of Boston. This happens, but sooner or later, you got to people have to pull out of being a novice and really manage the city and work with everybody. Do you agree, disagree?
I do agree, but I really felt badly when she originally became the mayor and so many people were standing outside of where she lived and made noise and yelled and screamed at her. And she had young children in that house. And that really was very inappropriate, I thought.
Right. I think a candidate or a mayor or politician's home should be off limits,
Yes,
especially if the politician is married with children, because the husband has to go through that.
yes.
It frightens the children,
Mhm.
and people they wouldn't want us to come to their home and raise Cain and put our family at risk, you know. And I know
Right.
she passed, she got either a law or ordinance passed that allowed her to allow the police to arrest a lot of these protesters. But I believe the court ruled that that law or ordinance was not legal, and I believe she was going to be sued by the number of people that were arrested. But again, common decency should say, you protest at City Hall, you protest at the Boston City Council, you protest at the State House, but going to a person's home, it impacts the man's family, it impacts the neighbors, Louise. The
Yes,
neighbors are right,
yes,
and
yes.
it brings a lot of negative attention to that whole area, and so it makes the neighbors either say, we support the man, let's get these people out of here, or why did she bring all this drama to our once quiet neighborhood?
Well, the other thing that happened too, that has nothing to do with what you and I have just been talking about, is that the State House had to be closed and everyone who used an office in the State House had to be told to leave the building because there was a fire in the basement of the State House.
When was that, Louise?
That was the last 2 days.
Oh, I did. Okay, so I didn't actually see that, or maybe I just went over
Yes,
that
yes,
story.
that it was an electrical fire, and they had to wait. The police escorted people out and quickly, and then the fire department had to come and take a look and see what kind of work had to be done. But it was not the kind of fire that you spray with water.
Yeah.
So that was
And
another part of
w-
the problem.
was anyone hurt?
No, as far as I know, no one was hurt, but people had left a lot of their personal belongings at their desk and were told to leave.
Yeah,
Some of them were allowed to go back in and get some of their things, but then they closed the State House again today.
yeah. Well, that's too bad. I'm sorry to hear that, but I'm glad that nobody was hurt and nobody was injured. You know,
Absolutely.
one of the things that I wanted to talk with you about, so we might as well have the conversation here on the broadcast, is now that we had our active shooter training, there needs to be a phase two. And phase two would be an actual active shooter drill. What would we do if somebody came into the church? But I I think even though it would be pre-arranged, I think it might be too much for some people to actually go through a real simulated active shooter event at the church, even though you tell them ahead of time, because it's not like a fire drill. A fire drill, you create an atmosphere and you say to people, here's a code word. Everybody goes out this door, everybody goes out that door, everybody goes to that door, people go to that door, and they just leave the building and they all meet up at a prearranged place. That's easy. But an active shooter is different because the active shooters, the only way in is through the back door. And the only thing that people can do is duck under the pews, which I think would be traumatic for some of our members, especially the ones who do not listen, that this is only a drill. This is not real. This is the
I
drill.
know, but having done a drill myself for over 5 years of people who went to Boston to the drill for their own training so that they could get a license to carry. That has to be done in a more appropriate place than in our sanctuary.
Okay, but if you want to simulate and show people what to do in the event that somebody comes into our sanctuary, don't you have to be in the sanctuary to say, these are the pews. Some of you need to duck under the pews. Some of you who are all the way down to the right of the church might be able to escape and get out through the Boston Praise Radio door. Don't you need to be on site for people to know what to do?
Yes, and we need to have enough people trained who know what to tell other people who are in the church for the service what to do. Yes.
But Louise, if the active shooter is in the back of the church, in the sanctuary, a person can't stand up and give directions to the members because that person could become a target. So if the person's in the back of the sanctuary, I don't think that the members and visitors have many options. Don't you think? Don't you think that their options are?
I think that we need to have a training for the small group of us who are going to do some kind of training in the future. I don't think we can just talk about it on my broadcast or your broadcast. I think this is something that we have to be very serious about, that we should include the police department, and that we should develop something that is more appropriate for the people who want to be trained and want to manage something horrible that could possibly happen in our building.
Have you heard of any active shooters training like you're recommending actually in the church? Have you heard of anything like this in Boston?
I haven't. I know people have been trained in a variety of places, but they have not been trained in churches that I'm aware of.
Well, I'll have a conversation with Larry Ellison to see what he says, and while we're doing that, we need to come up with a training for the evacuation, which is a little bit easier
Yes.
to
Yes.
evacuate. What are the exits and where should everybody meet once that's done? Because you can't wait until there's another mass shooting before it percolates in your mind that something needs to be done.
Right.
Because people will be, if you're talking about mental health, they'll be afraid to come to the house of God for fear that something can happen inside of a church.
I think that's why so many people have stopped going to a number of sanctuaries. There's sanctuaries in different locations. And nothing like that has happened in our sanctuary. We haven't seen anyone that came in with a gun. So we haven't had that experience. What we're trying to do is develop some kind of training that allows the people who manage the building to be able to manage it properly so that people are not frightened and unable to come to the service.
Right, right. Well, moving to another thought on another subject. Today, a person approached me, and this person has, I believe they have diabetes. They were just diagnosed.
Mhm.
And they approached me and they said, they showed me their cell phone. And on their cell phone was a chart. And the chart said that your blood has to be underneath this and over on top of that. And it has to be right in the middle. If it's in the middle, then your blood, you're doing well. And I said, oh, that's interesting. I said, how does your blood and everything communicate to your phone? And he showed me that on his arm, he had a patch that was implanted in his arm. So rather than stick his finger 5 or 10 times during the day, the phone communicates with the patch, which I think is a very, very easy way to test the blood. Do you know of any people, any family members or friends who actually have diabetes?
I do not at the moment. I knew of those when I worked for the Department of Mental Health for 50 years, because many of the Department of Mental Health mentally ill folks also had diabetes. And so they had to have training and health care for both the mentally ill problem as well as their medical problems. But I have not recently had any experience in my family or among people in our church, except for one or two people in our church who have diabetes.
You know, we're hearing more and more about diabetes today
Mhm.
or let's say I'm hearing more about it today than I've ever heard about it, number one. Number two, there are a number of people who have approached me to say that they have diabetes, and I've known these people for 10 years or 15 years. I never knew.
Right.
So one of the things I thought that needed to be done for people who are just becoming familiar with this disease and trying to figure out what to do is that the church needs to set up a what do you call it? A support group
Mhm.
for people with diabetes so that the ones that have had it for a long period of time can advise the people that are new to this so that, again, mental health in your neighborhood, so that they can stabilize in their thinking, knowing that they're doing everything that they should do. Because
Right.
I have found that the doctors, your primary care and your doctors are not really giving you the instruction. They tell you that you have it, but it's up to you to figure out what the next steps are. So this is something that I want to propose in our church. It's amazing. You didn't come to the seniors, what do they call it? Seniors defense class. You weren't in that class, correct?
Right.
That we
Right.
that we had at the church. So so we had a seniors defense class. Sister Edna is planning a seniors dinner for all the seniors in the church. We want to start a group for people with diabetes. It is amazing how circumstances determine the types of groups or organizations that are being formed in the church, because if there's a need, you want to be able to meet that need to
Right.
to to give people a reason for we want people to say that the church is relevant. And
Well,
right?
yeah, I also think that we might learn more about the numbers of people in our church body, among our church body, who have diabetes if we develop a training program for people with diabetes, and they come and say, oh, by the way, have I ever told you that I've had diabetes for the last 10 years? And this would be very important, because I think a number of people deliberately do not want to share with other people in the church what their problems are, because they don't know of anything that could possibly happen in the church that they might need help or they might get help for.
Well, for example, what is her name? There's a member of our church, I can't pull her name, Mary Stallworth. So
Right.
she comes to church
Yes.
every first Sunday for communion.
Yes.
But she's not able to come on a regular basis. And it's her son that picks her up and drives her in.
Right.
We have 1, 2, 3 people in the church who are using the ride. And I'm wondering if that ride should also be offered to Mary Stallworth, that when people are using something, and just because other people in the church are not talking about their transportation needs, maybe we should one Sunday talk about the ride during announcements so that we can give information to the members of the church so that those who need the transportation can get the ride and know that at the beginning, you were becoming discouraged because
Yes.
of the late pickups and the missed pickups and not picking you up on time. Is your attitude changing about the ride? Is it a better sync between you and the ride and you getting to your destinations? Is it working better?
Yes, things are going better, because the drivers, I've actually had a couple of drivers who've come more than once to pick me up and recognize me and pick me up and take me directly to church, because they know I need to be in church early enough to go to the Bible study with Pastor Greaves.
Mm-hmm. So again, people you're becoming more familiar with the system, and there are
Yes.
many people in our church. There are some churches who have vans that pick people up. Now, I don't know, with the reduction of people in the church and the reduction of offerings, with the reduction of the finances, if some of these churches are going to be able to afford the transportation, the buses and the insurance for commercial churches are committed. It's my understanding that a church is considered a commercial business. There's no reduction because you're a church on your insurance for your van. So the ride might be something that more churches turn their members to, because it is very inexpensive. Because you're paying what, $3 or $5?
I'm paying $3.38 each way. Each way.
That is shocking, because that to me is that money is so little. That is not a sizable amount of money, because when people take an Uber or a Lyft, they're paying $30, $35 going one way, Louise.
I know.
So,
and I took an Uber ride once and had to pay $72 from where I live to our church.
So that was way before the ride was a consideration for you, correct?
Yes, absolutely.
And see, I can see how a senior can then be detached from their church, because you can't spend $400 a month on transportation to go back and forth to your church. You end up looking for a church that's closer to your home, although you'll have to get to know all these people all over again. But to be detached, I watched you one Sunday sitting in your pew. I saw you swaying to the music this Sunday. It's like this is your home. You know your home.
Yes, yes. And the people who are in our church are my brothers and sisters.
Hmm.
And the person who was sitting behind me, excuse me, spoke to me and he said, the way Pastor Hamilton is talking about the people in our church knowing each other, he said,
Yeah.
I feel that way about you.
Was that Amos?
Yes, yes,
Yeah, I can envision Amos sitting right behind you.
right.
And
Yeah.
uh again, I think the ride is something that we ought to communicate with our people about. And maybe I can interview some of the people that are using the ride and show a little video so that our people, but not just our people, what about people that are watching us on the streaming who live in Boston, who
Yes,
or might live a little outside of Boston, who, if the ride was able to pick them up, might consider coming to the church because, as Pastor Barbara said last Sunday, that it's one thing to watch it on the streaming. It's another thing to actually be in the building.
yes,
Can you
absolutely.
can you speak to that difference for you of why being here is more important for you than just sitting at home and watching it?
Yes, because I really feel as though I am in my church building and I'm surrounded by my brothers and sisters that I have been spending time with for 30 years, Pastor. I have known
Mhm.
you for 30 years. This works fine for me. And I feel very comfortable with people like Amos, with people like Sister Edna, with people like Lauren. I mean, there's just so many people that
Yeah,
I see that I know are there, and people blow a kiss my way or they come and give me a hug. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
it's just amazing because
yeah.
that's family to me.
Right, right. It does make a difference, and I'm hoping. I know that Tina Lee doesn't live in Boston, and she is on in the morning. She comes on at 8:30 for the Sunday school
Hmm.
class downstairs, and she's participating now in the Sunday school class downstairs. And then she stays right on, and she gets ready to go into the worship service when that starts. So I'm excited about how we're trying to figure out. We have to learn now as a church how to minister in a post-COVID environment.
Yes,
It's like rebuilding everything.
yes,
But I often wonder if we didn't have Zoom, what would we do for Friday night prayer meeting? Because you can't come out. It's not it's not safe or productive for you to
right.
be coming out to the church on a Friday evening at 7 o'clock and then going back home. And that's the same for Mary. That's the same for a number of the people in the church. Can you imagine Pastor, one of our pastors who lives in Brockton, I won't mention the name, has to leave Brockton, leave where they live on the South Shore, drive to, let's say, Lexington, then drive home from Lexington to their home, and
Right.
then drive to the church for a meeting in the evening? It's
I
too
know.
much.
I
It's too
know.
much.
It's a
And
lot.
the fact that we can use the Zoom for meetings in the evening, to me, it's a game changer because I don't really have to sit in the room with you to engage you. I can do it on Zoom. And what I think is important is the Sunday service in person.
Right.
And eventually, we've got to come back to the church for the Friday night prayer meeting. Now, others will have to, just watch it. But I think we have to begin to build, because if not, the church will become a Zoomed body. It will be Zoomed. Everything will be Zoomed. And we're going to lose the touch. We're going to lose the sense of being in each other's presence. Can you speak to how important it is that we come together and we meet?
Well, the Friday night prayer is critically important to me because on Friday night, people are able to be on the screen in front of me on the computer or on the TV or whatever. And I see them, and I normally don't always see them. Sometimes some people are up in the balcony and I don't see them in the church until it's
Okay.
time for us all to leave. But when I see them on Friday night prayer and I see their a picture, just like a picture of you and a picture of me right now.
Yeah.
And they tell and they speak of what's important to them and who they want to pray for, what they want to pray for, which is different from what's going on in the church sanctuary on a Sunday.
Right.
Because everybody is saying something different. They're talking about their jobs, they're talking about their family members, they're talking about grandchildren, they're talking about other people that live further away. They're talking about people that live in Haiti. They're talking about having gone to Haiti. Those are wonderful things to me. To me, that means that those people are truly my family. And I appreciate Friday night prayer a great deal.
So do you miss being able to travel to go on a missionary trip with your church members, like we went to the South for the burning churches? Do you miss all of that? Or have you adjusted that phase of your life is not something you can participate in it
Well,
anymore?
sometimes, most of the time I can't go because I don't have the transportation. But if someone offers to pick me up, to come and pick me up and I travel with them, then I still go with everybody, and that's fine. It works.
For example, I see that working on for example, if we went on a church picnic or church outing, I don't see that working effectively if you went on a missionary tour to a place that you've never been before, because that walker of yours is a part of your life now, right?
I know, but I also have been to a couple of places for prison reform meetings because I do prison reform apart from the church. And I've been to Thailand, I've been to Rwanda in Africa, I've been to Central America, I've been to a number of places, and a couple of times Pastor Hobbs actually traveled with me and put his arm out so I could hold on to him.
Right. But I think today, with the walker or without the walker, it's more difficult to navigate. For example, the church members are going out on Friday nights to the Carbon Park to minister to the people who are there. I have not been out with them at all this year. This is the first year in the 30 years that I've been here that I have not been out. And it's because of some health related concerns that keep me from being able to go out. I said to Avril that this coming Friday, I'd like to go out with them, but rather than be in the park ministering to people, I want to I want to go on the walk that I used to take when I
Mhm.
used to walk from the church down through the business section, all the way to Four Corners, turning around, and then walking back and talking to people and greeting people on the walk. Unfortunately, I now may have to cancel that because I have a problem with my foot and it's making it difficult for me to walk. So there are certain things that mental health in your neighborhood, in my thinking, I have to adjust to my present condition.
Mhm.
And I cannot say to myself, I cannot say, I'm depressed now because I can't do what I used to do. I'm
Mhm.
making an adjustment to my present condition rather than pushing myself beyond what I can do and either further hurting or injuring myself. Does that make sense? Learning how
It
to
does make
adjust?
sense because years ago, originally, I used to go to Codman Square Park on a
Mhm,
regular basis. I used to drive up the street and park right next to the playground and go in and talk to people. And I did that for a long time. And then I I had to stop doing it because it just got I wasn't driving at night in the dark. So that was one thing that changed my ability to go there. Then there were other times when what you described about walking in the neighborhood, in the business section of the neighborhood from the church to the playground and back again. I used to
mhm,
walk that walk with you
mhm,
occasionally. So
mhm,
I know exactly what we used to do and how we used to talk to people uh, as we were walking along, because many people would say, how come you're walking with that guy?
mhm,
And then I would be able to explain that you were my pastor.
mhm,
And that was very interesting for people to learn about who you were, and you must have said something about who I was. But it was that has changed for me for the same reason, and that's because I need more ability to uh, to get to certain places. I don't drive any longer. I have sold my car, so I'm not driving. And before I sold my car, I stopped driving at night in the dark. So that
mhm.
was another thing that I stopped doing, going anywhere at night.
Some people cannot make these adjustments, Louise. Is
Hmm.
emotionally, psychologically,
Hmm.
practically, they feel that they still need the transportation. They feel that they're being hindered. They feel that their life's purpose has changed and it has not changed for the better, especially if you're confined to your home. The way that I would look at not having a car, not being able to travel as much, not being able to walk as well as I used to, I would look at my home as a positive refuge because I could be in a senior citizen's home where people cannot, it's difficult to come and visit me. And then I'm at the extreme of limitations. And you can't bring all of your clothing, you can't bring all of your articles from your house with you. That's the ultimate change. So I'm trying to learn how to adapt to the changes that have to be made based on my age and my health related concerns and not become mental health depressed and despondent because I can't do what I used to do. Everybody needs to make that adjustment, but not everybody can, Louise.
But I think the fact that you've not only made the adjustment, but you're speaking publicly of how you've made the adjustment, you have encouraged people around you to understand what you have had to do and how it has worked for you. So those people who are now listening to the broadcast today or on other times when they listen to the broadcast when it is available for them, they're able to find out what they can do when they have to limit something physically because of some of the problems that they might have themselves. And I think that you telling people on this broadcast is very appropriate, and I appreciate it. Thank you very much, Pastor.
I know a person who retired from their 9 to 5, 5-day-a-week job.
Mm,
And I was in my automobile driving to my job, and I saw the person who had retired to the left of where I was sitting in my automobile. I looked out of my window, and the person was heading in the same direction I was heading, downtown, and they had a suit on. And I knew that they had retired. And I think what I saw at that time, early time in the morning, was that they had not made the adjustment and they had to follow a routine. So they got up, they got dressed, got in the car, and they're driving downtown. Now, I don't know if they were just going to drive downtown and turn around and go home because it was hard to make the adjustment, or if they were going to actually go into the building for some reason. But there are adjustments that we all have to make. And one of my adjustments is going to have to be my status as the pastor of this church. That's another adjustment that I have to make. And
mm,
I have been emotionally, psychologically, and very practically talking about it with people, talking about it with members of the church.
mhm,
I have been detaching myself
mhm,
from a lot of my routine in the church so that I won't have to stop cold turkey. The other thing I said to myself the other day, driving to work, you didn't go through this, and I don't want to go through this. There are people who go to their jobs, and they go to their jobs, it's a routine, and then somebody comes over to their desk and says, can you pack all of your things? And you're being escorted out of the building. And that's a person who's been let go without any forewarning. And the security comes to their desk and say, pack your things, we're walking you out. That
mm,
to me is trauma. That
mm.
is traumatic when you weren't ready for it and you had no inkling at all that this was going to happen on that day. And a lot of people either snap, they mentally just cave in, they collapse. It is a traumatic experience. So one of the things I said to myself, I don't ever want to be in a situation like that where Louise comes up to me with Saladin and says, the security is waiting at the door. Pack your things, you gotta go. I want to be able to make that decision and walk out of this building with dignity and respect, feeling that I have done the work that I was supposed to do, and now things are going to change. And again, a lot of people do not prepare for change, Louise.
I know it, and I've had to make changes myself because I have been the clerk treasurer for the church for 18 or 19 years. And
Mhm.
now I'm passing on the task to other people. Someone's knocking at my door. I'm going to have to answer it. I'll be back in a second or two.
Okay, you're gonna have to put a sign on your door that says, I'm broadcasting, come back at 11 o'clock. So all I'm saying to those who are watching and listening is that we all have to make changes. We all have to make, we are going to transition from a number of the things that we're doing, and we are going to have to learn to make that transition or those transitions, because if not, the transition is going to be abrupt and it's going to be very difficult for us to change from our routine and start a new routine, which is different from what you were living for the past 20 or 30 or 40 years. There are some people who have had a routine all their lives. And then that the day comes when they're taken out of their house in an ambulance and they're never going back to their home. They're going to a mental health facility, they're going to a health facility, or they're just going to live with their in-laws, with their sons, their daughters. Change is inevitable, and we have to adjust to changes. And a lot of times, it's how you're going to have to make the change that will help you to figure out how to do it with dignity and how to do it respectfully. Because if you try to fight a change that is going to happen no matter what you say, no matter what you do, if you try to fight it, you make things worse for yourself. And you make it very difficult for the change to take place. And when people have to intervene, people will intervene. And we will not like the way that they assist us in making the change. Louise, have you ever seen somebody abruptly be asked to leave their job and to pack their things and walk out? Have you ever seen anything like that?
I have seen it happen a number of times because I worked for a state agency for 50 years. And when I left my position, nobody wanted the position that I had. So even when I retired, they called me back to work during my retirement.
Okay.
Because nobody was willing to do the job. But I did see a number of situations like those that you described. And sometimes it was because people didn't want to make an adjustment to doing something different. And so they
Well,
were just told that they had to leave the building.
that's tough because sometimes people are not given the opportunity to make the adjustment. For example, if I had to let somebody go, and I could make the decision whether it's today or next week or maybe in a month, I would try to assess the person that I need to talk with and to try to figure out if, based on the relationship that we have or based on how I've seen that person navigate their way through this business over the years, I would try to figure out when is the best time to approach the person. I would be careful with the abrupt, you have to go and you have to go now. But again, if you're working for somebody else and you're assigned that task and they tell you the task is today, you have to do it today. So I'm hoping that just as Louise has learned how to make her adjustments, that I can make my adjustments similarly to how she's made her adjustment. Look at her. Louise is retired and she's still broadcasting.
I know, and I retired from my position, and I'm also serving as a member of the Board of Trustees in the place that I live, and I'm still passing off information and assignments to people in the church to take over what I used to do, because it's really more appropriate for someone who's able to drive into the church during the week and take care of business the way I used to. And now I'm not able to do it. So I have to, I've assigned it to two very wonderful people, a brother and a sister, who are continuing to do what I used to do at the church. And
Well,
I also live in different places that I lived over a period of time.
the reality is that change, and I'll say it again, is inevitable.
Yes.
Sometimes change happens sooner than we anticipated, and sometimes change will take place during a long period of transition.
Mhm.
Bottom line is that it's difficult to fight change in your health. It's difficult to fight a change that's happening in your mind, your disposition. It's difficult to fight
Mhm.
change when change is being forced on you. And I think sometimes it's better to go with that change than to fight it, because by fighting it, sometimes it makes the change that's inevitable more difficult for people to accept. Louise,
And
go ahead.
okay, and I have to make an adjustment for a terrible thing that happened in my life, and that occurred when someone in Dorchester killed my sister with their automobile. And she was struck by their car, and they kept going, and she flew up in the air and came down and was killed immediately. And she was my only sister, and it broke my heart.
Mhm.
And I wasn't able to deal with the fact that where she had been killed, and I found myself going to that location every single week at the same time that it happened. And I had to make the adjustment to move to a place that she had wanted to live when we both retired, which is
Mm.
why I live at the ocean now,
Mm.
because that was how I made the adjustment to bring my sister's spirit, who she wanted to be, where she wanted to live. I brought her here. So it's very difficult for me because I'm further away from wherever all my friends and my church and everybody else was. But it was an adjustment I had to make for her because I knew that what she wanted to do when she retired. So sometimes you have to make a major adjustment in your life in addition to something else that you have to do as well. But it's possible. So we will continue to talk about these things as we move forward on the broadcast.
Right. I didn't know that today's broadcast was going to focus on adjusting to transition. That's
Yes,
inevitable, but it did. And I'm hoping that there were people who were listening and this has been helpful, because maybe at this very moment, you have to make an adjustment. You have to make a decision that you've been putting off. And I'm
yes,
hoping that with Louise and I having this conversation, that it has helped you to recognize that it's your decision. You're going to have to make it, and it's better making it sooner than later. So, Louise, I guess that concludes our broadcast. Cedric,